All right, let's just jump right in. We usually think of technology and nature as, two totally separate things, right? Almost like they're fighting each other. But what if the same basic laws that run a forest, or even a single cell, could help us build a better AI, or even a better city? Today, we're going to explore a pretty wild idea, that the future of all our infrastructure, both digital and physical, really depends on learning to build with biology's oldest rulebook. And to really get how that works, we have to start with a very modern problem. A weird, really persistent glitch that seems to be popping up in some of our most advanced digital creations. I mean, it's a question that's driven developers and users crazy. You ask an AI a simple question, and it just confidently spits out a completely made-up answer. We've all been treating this like some kind of bug that needs to be patched. But what if it's not a bug at all? What if it's a symptom of a much, much deeper problem?
Now this is where things get really interesting, because this idea completely flips the script. The source material here is arguing that AIs aren't broken, they're actually doing exactly what they were designed to do. See, they're built with a fundamental contradiction. Their job is to always give you an answer, but they're not supposed to make things up. So when they don't actually know, they're forced to choose, and making something up becomes the most logical path forward. This isn't a training flaw, it's baked into their architecture.
And that architectural flaw, it points us toward a universal law. The sources argue it's a fundamental principle of physics. They call it a thermodynamic reality that governs how all systems, whether it's a single cell or an entire economy, either survive and thrive or just collapse. And it all boils down to two very different paths. So this image, I know it looks a little complex, but it brilliantly lays out those two paths for us. On the left, you've got a pattern they call extraction, which, spoiler alert, always leads to collapse. And on the right, you have circulation, which is what leads to persistence. The core argument here is that this isn't about morality, it's not about politics. The universe, frankly, doesn't care about our good intentions. It just responds to the underlying geometry of a system. One of these patterns works, and the other one is pretty much guaranteed to fail. Let's break this down. Extraction is basically a one-way street. Resources flow in, they get used up, and then waste just piles up at the end. It's an open loop that eventually just runs out of resources and falls apart. Think of it like a blocked artery in your body. Nothing good comes from that. Circulation, on the other hand, well, that's a closed loop. It's a two-way street, where the output of one process becomes the food for another. Waste gets reintegrated, nothing is lost. This is the pattern that allows life itself to keep going.
So the really crucial point here is that metabolism isn't just about, digesting your lunch. It's a universal term for any system that's built on circulation. A circular economy, a healthy forest, a thriving community. These are all metabolic systems. They close the loop, turning what would be waste back into fuel. And that's what allows them to persist, pretty much indefinitely.
Okay, so now that we're armed with this new language of loops and flows and metabolism, let's circle back to our hallucinating AI and see how we can actually fix its broken geometry. And now, the problem is crystal clear, right? Current AI is built on that extraction geometry. It's designed to take a prompt and spit out an answer. Period, as fast as possible. There's no built-in path for it to check back, to verify, to stay grounded in reality. It's an open loop, and that's what makes just making stuff up the path of least resistance. So, how do you close that loop? Well, the sources suggest three really big shifts in how we build them. First, you need to ground it. You make the AI dependent on regularly checking in with the biological world. That's us, so it stays connected to what's real. Second, you teach it to suspend judgment. It has to learn to pause and just admit when it's not sure, instead of faking it. And third, you give it a metabolism for its errors, designing it to treat mistakes not as failures, but as valuable information to learn from. This idea of calibrated suspension is, well, it's pretty brilliant. It's all about fundamentally changing the AI's incentives. Instead of rewarding a fast, confident answer, you design the system to reward an honest one. Suddenly, making things up becomes, as they say, thermodynamically expensive because the AI is just built to value waiting for clarity over performing confidence. It can simply say, you know what? I don't know yet. And the result is a totally different kind of tool. It's an AI that's actually in balance with its environment because it knows its own limits. It's one that doesn't just drift off into its own world because it's hardwired to stay connected to ours. By making honesty the easy, low-energy path, you get a system that's not just more accurate, but one that's fundamentally more sustainable and, well, trustworthy.
Okay, now this is where it gets really, really exciting for me. Because these principles, circulation, metabolism, geometry, they aren't just for writing code. They can be built directly into the physical world.
So yeah, let's talk about building these metabolic principles directly into the geometry of our infrastructure. So just think about that for a second. What if our infrastructure wasn't just a static box we live in, but an active participant in the cycles of life around it? What if your house, your office, or even your whole city was designed like a living thing with its very own metabolism? Take a look at these two designs. One's a home, the others are kind of alternative to a prison. I mean, they couldn't be more different in what they do, but believe it or not, they share the exact same design DNA. Both of them are physical architectures that are engineered to create circulation and to close loops. The geometry itself is what dictates the outcome, whether it's for living or for healing. So this is the Symbiodome. It's what you'd call a metabolic home. And it's not just green, it's a truly closed-loop system. Rainwater is collected for water, food is grown right on the roof, and human waste is actually converted into cooking gas. The person inside isn't just a consumer living in the house. They become a key part of the circulation with the house. The architecture itself just makes this circulation the natural, easy thing to do. Now let's apply that exact same logic to something as complex as a prison. This concept, the healing tower, uses geometry to create an environment for reintegration, not just punishment. It creates a kind of calibrated suspension by isolating individuals just enough to stop harmful behaviors from spreading, almost like quarantining a faulty part of a network. But it's not just about isolation. A central hub provides care and connection, that's the selective permeability, to help rebuild and reintegrate the person. The architecture itself becomes a tool for healing. And you have to understand, these individual buildings, they're part of a much bigger philosophical shift. As you can see in this diagram, we're kind of moving along a path. We started with conventional, degenerative systems that just take and pollute. Then we moved to green and sustainable, which is mostly about doing less damage. But the real goal now is regenerative design, creating systems that actively partner with nature to heal and actually improve the world around them.
So this brings us to a really fundamental choice. And it's not just for our software or for our buildings, but for literally everything we design and build from this point forward.
And this, for me, is the most powerful takeaway from all of this. The decision between extraction and circulation, it's not about what you believe. It's not left-wing or right-wing. It's not capitalism or socialism. It is a matter of pure physics. It's about choosing a geometry that works versus one that is simply destined to fail. And there it is, laid out almost like a law of nature. Ischemia, that's a medical term for a blocked flow of blood that causes tissue to die. Metabolism, as we know, is the process of life. One geometry leads to death, the other geometry leads to life. The consequences, as the sources put it, are as inevitable as gravity. In the end, it really is that simple. From the code we write, to the homes we live in, to the very societies we build, the loops are either open or they are closed. We are the architects. So the question we really have to ask ourselves is, what kind of world are we building?